alumni, forming a growing network of alumni promoting hands-on participation in civic life. School alumni have instigated or operated over 300 civic projects in the last 2 decades, and there are 60 running at the moment. And I think it was Natalia Lasiva a decade ago who said, and I quote, "The school changes one's thinking. Freedom and democratic values cease to be merely catchy headlines in foreign newspapers. The school is a phenomenon you have to experience to believe." And I say that in the hallowed and distinguished presence of the chairman of the Constitutional Committee of the Russian Duma, whom we are delighted to welcome here tonight. Do not be shy, sir. Brandish your hand in the air so that your presence can be recognised and appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a happy occasion, and I just conclude at the risk of embarrassing him, and before we hear from Lena and Shirley and others, by saying 2 things. First, I love hosting functions here because these are the public rooms, the state rooms, the function rooms of Speaker's House. I just happen to be the current Speaker, but they're not in any real sense my rooms. They're rooms that belong to British civil society and people who pay their taxes to support our Parliament. And I believe in opening them up to mark and champion great causes. And there can be scarcely a greater cause than spreading liberty, democracy, free discussion, the inalienable rights of human beings in Moscow and throughout Russia and besides. And I see parliamentarians who've always, and former parliamentarians, been committed to that cause. Jeff Lawler doesn't have to look behind him as though I'm looking at somebody else, but in fact I'm looking at Jeff himself. And finally, I say, I've known Keith Hampson for, I think, 20 years. When I first knew Keith, he regarded me as a rather disgraceful, raging right-winger, and he sought to persuade me that Michael Heseltine was the embodiment of all things good, decent and respectable in the Tory party. I confess I wasn't persuaded at the time by Keith, and the obligations of impartiality of the office of Speaker prevent me saying whether I'm any more persuaded now. But I liked and respected Keith then. He served for 23 years as Conservative Member of Parliament for Leeds North West, always an internationalist, and since he left the House he's been very committed to the Moscow School, to regular visits, to the staging of programmes, to invitations to speakers. And John Whittingdale, my parliamentary colleague who chairs the Culture, Media, Olympics and Sports Select Committee, has just told me that he was inveigled by Keith to take part in a programme recently, and that's what happens. Keith's charms are irresistible, and he gets people to take part. So I'm delighted that rather belatedly, Keith, in your presence and the presence of Sue, we're able to hold this event. And ladies and gentlemen, you will be mightily relieved to know that my speech of welcome is now, thankfully, at an end.